Cormac O'Hara on tonight's panel. Noel Ahern of Fianna Fáil, Dr Liam Toomey of Fine Gael, Richard Boyd Barrett, the New United Left Alliance, Peter Brown, the Irish Institute of Financial Trading. The question of burning bank bondholders re-emerged, with Fine Gael raising the issue again today, and even the European Commission exploring the idea as well. Peter Brown, what do you make of this? Finally, they're coming round, it seems, to explore this issue.
Yeah, well, there's something extraordinary going on here at the moment. We're rushing through an agreement for a $6 billion extraction out of an Irish economy which is showing no growth. We're putting in growth forecasts against that, which most bond investors would regard as unrealistic. We're now seen to be rushing through a deal with the IMF and EU, which seems to have taken on a greater urgency. My own view is that we're being pressurised into these deals to try and stabilise Spain and Portugal with a greater European agenda.
But we're being told by the government that the situation here even is urgent, and not to mention contagion. But here we need to get a stability or a finance package to stabilise the economy here.
We're being told that we're funded till. The government are telling us we're funded till June next year. What is the urgency? I don't understand the urgency. I understand the need to sit back, make a long-term strategic decision on what is right for the Irish economy.
And in terms of exploring the issue of burning senior bondholders in banks now, why was that not explored months ago or even years ago? Why was the Minister for Finance and the government in general telling us that you can't go there?
Well, a decision was taken to link the sovereign and banking debt into one to expose the Irish taxpayer to the full. Long ago, I think that strategy should have been reviewed, and we should have separated what was sovereign debt and what is banking debt. And unfortunately, we're heading down a path here that is going to involve the taxpayer underwriting present and all future banking debt.
On that, what Richard Boyd Barrett proposes, the whole banking sector would have collapsed, and that's vital for the economy.
This situation was fluent continuously. It wasn't the moment in time in September 2008. I think everyone would have made the same decision at that point. The reality is, since then, right, there's been plenty of opportunity to look at the bondholders, to look at the risk they have, and to make them bear some of the pain. Now, the reality is, nobody knows, right, in terms of AMB and Bank of Ireland, what the mortgage debt exposure is and how bad it's going to get. The problem we've got is another decision is going to be made very soon that the taxpayer is holding that risk. That risk needs to be taken from the taxpayer and put on to the bondholders.
You're saying that still now bank debt and sovereign debt is being seen as one.
It's the same.
And
it needs to be separated.
Lowering wages in the name of competitiveness,
we'll come to that.
All those sort of.
Peter Brown wants to get in on that issue.
Yeah, there's one issue here. The markets know about our $6 billion budget. This year, they know about our $15 billion budget over 4 years. The markets know about our bailout from the IMF and the EU. It has not had one iota of effect, right, on the credibility of Ireland, either from the banks raising interbank money or from the bond rate. So, I am a market expert, right? I'm not convinced by this, and I'm heavily biased towards Ireland. Now, if you go out there into the market...
You're not convinced by what the adjustments...
I'm not convinced by the strategy. I think that the strategy is going to lead to a debt servicing requirement that this state will not be able to afford and will lead to a sovereign debt default further down the line.
Peter Brown, can I ask you a very simple question? And you are a market expert. Once the bondholders handed the money over, did they expect to get that money back, or did they think there may be a risk here, even senior bondholders, there may be a risk here that I might lose all or some of the money?
All bonds carry different interest rate return. And that different interest rate return reflects the fact that there's a risk involved. Right? When people buy bonds, they buy risk. Right? That's the way the markets work.
So can I just be very clear? Even senior bondholders, are you saying that once the deal was done, they knew there may be someday a risk that they'd lose the money?
It is very, very unusual, right, in terms of senior bond, in terms of risk. But every financial transaction carries risk, and it's priced accordingly.
That isn't
right?
what we were told. We were told that legally they had the same status as depositors. They had to be protected.
If you buy Irish government bonds, it's sovereign risk. All bonds have risk. It depends. If it's bank bonds, it has bank risk. If you buy bank bonds in a country that isn't within the Western world, is unstable, that's got higher risk.
So can I ask you,
all bonds have
once
risk.
you heard the Irish government say over the last 2 years that especially senior bank bondholders had to be protected almost at all costs, what did you make of that?
Well, you have to go through levels. I mean, there's junior bondholders as well, right, that have a lower level of status, right? So they would be first in line. But, I mean, the markets understand these things. They understand that they're involved in risk, and they put their money in places that attract different yields all the time, and the yields reflect the risk involved in the transaction.
Okay, so let me
we're
bring
dealing with markets who understand this.
And
right?
let me bring you to
the
September 2008. Once the markets knew there was a major crisis in Ireland, were they first of all very apprehensive about losing their money, and how did they react then once the bank guarantee was given?
No, the correct decision was made in 2008 because it was a decision made in a very short period of time. It wasn't known what the full extent was. The whole banking sector in Ireland, it was intrinsically linked. AIB lent money to Bank of Ireland lent money to Anglo. The whole thing was intrinsically linked. So the right decision was made then. But in the course of time, over 2 years, there's been plenty of opportunity to revisit this strategy and to take a stance that the Irish taxpayer is not underwriting all of this risk.
Noel Ahern of Fianna Fáil, plenty of opportunity, but you sat on your hands.
Well,
never get another cent.
Sorry, Brenda, can I just reply to that, right? We don't get 1 cent from the international markets at the moment, not even in short-date interbank borrowing, because our banks are in a situation, right, where they've practically no value left in their shareholding. They cannot raise funds. They're borrowing 165 billion from the ECB to keep the doors open, right? We can't get worse. Now, if you look at the markets over the history and places that have burned bondholders, bondholders come back and they look at a situation at the present. So if the burning bondholders restore the credibility to the sovereign, you would find it will restore credibility to people wanting to invest in the sovereign.
I'll go to a number of the texts and comments. Would you take part in a protest against taxes that are coming down the line?
I'd want to know who was organising it.
But say for example, you were Joe Citizen. Would you protest against impending taxes?
Well, I did in the past.
Would you now?
Well, that's maybe an unfair question because
why?
I'm not now.
Would you march on
No, but
Saturday?
is that the essential difference?
Yeah, well, I did do so before, so I might well do so. But I would be.
You might well do so now.
Yeah, but I would be very nervous and very careful, and I'd be particularly watching that I wasn't getting taken over because some groups, as we've even seen in recent days, look on these as their bread and butter, and they see them as an opportunity to cause trouble, be it in Dublin or be it in London.
Peter
or whatever
Brown,
they
what
are.
do you make of the new United Left Alliance advocating protest until they stop as a strategy?
Well, I mean, protesting is a democratic right, is the first point. I think if a new party enters the arena right now, they need to have some credible policies right across the board, in terms of fixing this problem. I think the protesting issue, I think a lot of people out there are confused and worried. And they're confused and worried because a policy is being enacted upon us here that doesn't make any economic sense whatsoever.
Do you think the Irish public is crying out for a new political force to air their own views, their own frustrations?
Well, I mean, I don't have any political allegiance, but we have a very unusual situation here. This is the biggest decision this state will undertake for decades, right? And it will have implications on us for decades. And it's been taken by a government which, after it's been enacted, is going to resign. And then it's going to be taken up by probably a new government who are not buying into it, so there'll be no ownership of it, and they'll have to convince the people to go along with a budget that they don't have an ownership of and they didn't put in place. I mean, it's an absolutely bizarre scenario in the middle of the biggest crisis this country has ever faced.
For a market expert, what Richard Boyd Barrett says about taxing the wealthy heavily and wealth heavily, is that a runner to fund Irish society?
No, unfortunately it's not, right. Well, there's a couple of problems there. I mean, most of that people in that category are the most indebted, given the fall in value of property assets. The second problem is that if you behave like that in a society that's reliant on the capital markets, you just can't. We're going to have an indebtedness in excess of 200 billion. That money has to come from somewhere, and it's going to come from capitalists, unfortunately, and they will not invest in a state that's run like that, and that's just fortunately the fact.